What is the biggest concern as you head into this game? The Florida series or the way Tennessee played against Austin Peay last week? Let me hear you on the message board. Hit the like and subscribe button. Let's get up and go. Get excited. It is Florida week. 2 days until the Gators. And I don't care if it doesn't have the impact it had in the 90s or 2000s. This is fantastic drama, fantastic football. This is why we do this show each and every day. This is why you listen. This is why we love college football. What is the biggest concern, and why do people seem to be hedging their bets on the Vols? Is it the Austin Peay game or the way this series has unfolded over the past 20 years?
On a national scale, I think people are thinking about the series the last 20 years. For me personally, I think the biggest concern for the Vols is the Austin Peay game. And the reason I think it's that is because it's Josh Heupel versus Billy Napier. Most of the reasons you bet against Tennessee or bet on them to underperform against Florida the past 20 years, or really 30 years, is Dave, 90% of the time you knew Florida had a coaching advantage. I mean, even when Jim McElwain was at Florida, Butch Jones was at Tennessee. When Will Muschamp was at Florida, Derek Dooley was at Tennessee. And then when Jeremy Pruitt was at Tennessee, Dan Mullen was at Florida. So most of the time, you were betting on the fact that Florida was better coached. And don't even get me started on the 90s with Fulmer and Spurrier. The only time Tennessee, I felt, had up until this point, a coaching advantage was the 3 years Ron Zook was at Florida. I thought Philip Fulmer was a much better coach than Ron Zook, and I thought Tennessee had a coaching advantage there. I think the history is irrelevant with Josh Heupel at the helm. I have much more faith in Josh Heupel to have his kids ready than I do Billy Napier. I don't have as much faith in the passing game after last week with Austin Peay. So I think just on the field is a bigger concern than history now.
Okay. All that you said is true. However, these young men should have some confidence by beating Florida last year. However, talking to Cooper Mays, he said he does recall a lot of those games in which Florida just somehow found a way to win. A lot of those teams you mentioned, Tennessee may have been better than. I think that's overplayed a little bit because of the floor in which you have talent at Florida. It's only going to be so bad. It's as bad of a Florida roster that I've seen in those 20 years, top to bottom. And that's because of the recruiting or lack thereof of Jim McElwain. So all that you said is true, but you cannot discount the fact that these players growing up watching this Florida series over the past, let's say 10 years, because nobody remembers really specific football games when they were 10 years old. However, I will say this, they have seen an awful lot of times in which Tennessee has not gotten the job done. They have seen that personally, Caleb. So to say that it's just Josh Heupel and to say that Tennessee does not have any sort of hangover from the series, I think would be inaccurate. At the end of the day, they have the same feeling that I had when I was 22 and going to the University of Tennessee, and that is, it's Florida. You feel like Tennessee should win, but it's still Florida, so they might not. They are still of that age where they remember those games.
But Dave, you were a lifelong fan at 22 at that point. And also before Florida, you remember the Alabama series, which I remember, the late 80s, early 90s when Tennessee was better every year and found a way to lose. Florida kind of replaced Alabama with that sort of history where you just find a way to lose to Florida. Most players, as you know, Cooper's an exception, were not lifelong fans following Tennessee football. They probably never watched the Tennessee-Florida game before they were being recruited by Tennessee in 2016, 2017, maybe, or 2018, excuse me. And so the question then becomes, and now this is possible because look, this is true with Tennessee and Kentucky. You can tell with the fan base at Kentucky, the way they feel cursed against Tennessee, it seeps down to the players. So what I will concede is, even if you didn't watch the games, the fans know about it. And the culture on campus, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, sometimes doesn't the culture of the fan base on campus creep into the players' mindsets a lot of times?
Certainly, no question. Culture is a big, big deal. And I don't think the culture is great at Florida. I think it's really good at Tennessee.
Right. But I mean, what I guess what I meant, and so where I'll bolster your argument is I'll say the Tennessee fans and the way they feel about the series, I'm sure has creeped into some of the players who weren't watching the game back in 2016, 2015. But I do think what the culture Josh Heupel has established has helped Tennessee players tune out the fan base much more than Butch Jones, who I think got swept up in the culture, quite honestly. He got swept up in the fan base and he took it to heart. Derek Dooley, same thing. I don't think Jeremy Pruitt got swept up. I think Jeremy Pruitt just wasn't that good of an X's and O's coach. I think it was just that simple. But so, and Florida was better those Dan Mullen years. So I think that's where the history of the series doesn't have the same impact. If this was 2017, it would be 2016, 2015. It'd be different. When from 2014 to 2017, Tennessee was the better team all 4 years. They lost 2 games by 1 point, blowing a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter, and then they lost another off a Hail Mary because that was just the worst 4-year period that I think cemented everybody's idea that Tennessee's snake bitten with Florida. I don't think that poison exists, though, with Josh Heupel.
Okay, let's go mini history then since 2017 when the Vols are 1-6 against Florida. In Gainesville, they lost 26-20. Both teams ranked both teams ranked it was 26-20, right? 26-20.
No, I'm saying they're 1-5 since 2017, not 1-6.
Okay, since 2017 they're 1-6. They won one game. They lost
1-5.
No, 1-5. Sorry, my that's bad. Okay, 1-5. So 26-20 they lost in 2017. Both ranked. Could have won that game. That was in Gainesville. In Gainesville, 34-3, they weren't going to win that game. Bullethead was the head coach. And then 38-14, 2 years ago, Tennessee was in a transition period. Even if you want to look at the mini history, there is a sense of being used to losing at Florida. So I think that creeps into your head at some point. And all these demons that have been put into play by Jeremy Pruitt, by Butch Jones, by all those guys are not exercised. But in particular, they're not exercised with a lot of players on the team. You mentioned Jacob Warren and Cooper Mays. By the way, they are on billboards in Knoxville. And I didn't get any kudos whatsoever from the University of Tennessee concerning the fact that I picked the 4 best speakers who were on Off the Hook Sports. But that series history is still there just recently. I don't have to go back to 2005. I don't have to go way back then, but I can go back just the past few years. So the history is a factor. Do I think the Austin Peay is a bigger concern and why the media seems to be hedging their bets on Tennessee? Absolutely, no question about it. But don't tell me for a second that there's not a sense amongst the older players, the upperclassmen, and those that know SEC football. Don't have to be a fan of Tennessee or Florida, but just that know SEC football. Don't tell me that that is not in some shape, form, a factor in what and how they approach the game and look at this game. So I'm not going to say that the series is just gone and done because Josh Heupel has changed the culture. I still think there's a sense of going down there, and that's a tough, intimidating place to play. And when you get to tough and intimidating, the next step is that can affect you and take away some of your confidence because you haven't had success there. Again, we're talking about a set group of players. We're talking about players that like the SEC, that either rooted for Florida or Tennessee and know the rivalry, or that are upperclassmen. So not everybody, probably 25% of the roster, knows that this series has not gone Tennessee's way, even when they've been, air quotes, the better team.
Only people who were on the 2017 team, which Jacob Warren was, I think, or was he 2018? It was right around then. Only people who were tied to the program in 2017 are feeling that way. And I don't think anybody's on the 2017 team now.
No, that would be 7 years.
Yeah,
So nobody's on the
because
2017 team.
yeah, so nobody was on it, but maybe some recruits were following. So the reason I say only people from that team would care is because from 2018 to 2020, okay, actually no, 2018 to 2021, Florida was significantly more talented than Tennessee all 4 of those years. Significantly more so. From 2018 to 2020, Florida was significantly better coached than Tennessee in those 3 years because it was Dan Mullen versus Jeremy Pruitt. So the only one you could bring up to me of that 5-game winning streak from recent history is 2017, when Tennessee gave up a Hail Mary to lose because Butch Jones didn't realize that you should have a dime package when there's 9 seconds left in a game, and all you got to do is not allow a touchdown. But again, yeah, nobody is on that 2017 team now. I don't think anybody from 2018 to 2021, you don't look at those 4 games and say, oh man, Tennessee's cursed at Florida. You say, no, Florida was better talented, better coached, and that's it. The last time Tennessee played Florida and lost in a game where they were better was 2017. And again, that was with Butch Jones as head coach, and only Butch Jones could lose a game like that.
But what about something innate? What about something we can't put our hands on? By the way, Travis says, Dave, Donde Plowman just called me. She said, thanks for the billboard. You're welcome, Donde, or as I call you, the Big D. She is the Donde. That's her new nickname, the Donde. Donde, you're welcome. I picked the 2 best speakers. But Caleb, what about something innate and weird with the series? If you're going to take the series versus what happened against Austin Peay, what about the fact this is just a weird series? That Jabbar Gaffney catches a pass for about 0.01 seconds. That other teams, like going way back to Peyton Manning, that it just didn't work out for Peyton Manning. And there were odd plays and strange plays throughout this series that went in Florida's favor. What about some sort of, you can't prove it, but some sort of astral sort of thing where things just align against the Vols in this series? I'm talking about supernatural stuff. You have to almost factor that in, even if it doesn't affect the players. I mean, there's been some weird stuff in this series, dude.
You can bring up the Jabbar Gaffney catch. I can bring up Florida's 5 turnovers and giving the game away to Tennessee in 1998. I can also bring up, by the way, the personal foul penalty that was totally missed in 2004 when Jonathan Wade threw a shot at Dallas Baker and Dallas Baker retaliated, and the refs called a 15-yard penalty on Dallas Baker, which set up the James Woolhoit 50-yard field goal to win the game. So I'm just going to be honest with you. Let's stop pretending that Tennessee hasn't had a couple of lucky plays in this game. The truth was, in the 90s, Florida was talented, and they were better coached in the 90s.
Well, in the 90s, they had a better football team.
No, I actually think Tennessee had more talent. I disagree with you.
I completely
I can show you the NFL draft numbers to prove. I can show you the NFL success of the teams.
I'll tell you, 1 to 85, I would have taken that Gators roster 9 times.
Yeah, that Danny Warfel had a Hall of Fame career. That's why he was so much better than Peyton Manning.
He got one player. That's oversimplifying.